Hello, my name is Hannah Brown, and this is my thesis presentation for May 2020. The title of my presentation is Reforming Immigration. What is it that every human strives for? Perhaps it is acceptance or the feeling of stability. It may be the ability to work their way up to success and to be able to have a vision they can call their own, whether that be an occupation, a home, or a family. Now, what if that question were specific to Americans? What is it that they all strive for? If one were to ask them the aforementioned question, it can be assumed that they would all respond in a similar manner, that manner being to live in a free nation where equal opportunities are offered to every citizen and where each person may strive for the best lives possible, or more commonly known as the pursuit of happiness. It can be reasonably concluded that the answer given by most people would be well summed up and idealized with the answer of the American. However, it seems in the modern world, it seems like the ideal answer is only obtainable for certain people, more specifically the citizens of the United States. In recent years, discussion and debate around Central American immigration has escalated exponentially. Those opposed to immigration reform stand firm in the laws and constitutions on which this country was founded and believe that no one is above the law. Those who support reform speak of the equal opportunities every person should be given to achieve success and how adjusting current regulations would be beneficial. In addition to this, America would offer that freedom, as well as provide refuge from the dangers many face in their home countries. Which then is more important, the laws or a life? In order to change the current problematic immigration system of the United States, it must establish four main principles: the ability to adapt, establishment of a humane asylum, individual immigration courts, and creation of a path to citizenship for long-term undocumented immigrants. It is very important to clarify any terms that may be potentially misunderstood. All defined terms will be pulled from Oxford's dictionary instead of societal definitions. First, an immigrant is a person who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, allows certain people who came into the United States as children and meet several guidelines may request consideration of deferred action for a period of 2 years, subject to renewal. They are also eligible for work authorization. Finally, gross domestic product, or GDP, is a monetary measure of the market value of all final goods and services produced in a specific time period. In addition, the countries represented in Central America are Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. There is an elaborate history of Latino immigration and immigration policies that must be addressed in order to help one better understand the past events that motivated large migrations and the resulting legislation. Here, however, only the most crucial historical accounts will be addressed. Prior to 1902, there was a large increase of immigrants to America from Mexico fleeing from crop failure and poor pay. Approximately 100,000 Mexican refugees crossed the border into the United States seeking a better life. In 1917, many able-bodied Mexican workers were allowed to temporarily enter the United States in order to boost the workforce, while many American men were off to war. In the early 1930s, deportation of undocumented immigrants began, and over 300,000 Mexican Americans would be removed. From 1951 to 1964, the Baracio program brought in an annual average of 350,000 Mexican workers into America to fulfill the Mexican Labor Agreement. This agreement brought in many workers to help boost the workforce during the Korean War. Although many immigrants were being brought in, over 3.8 million undocumented immigrants were deported through Operation Wetback from 1954 to 1958. In the early 1960s and for the following few years, over 200,000 Cubans found asylum in southern Florida as they escaped Fidel Castro's reign. Miami eventually became bilingual later on in the 20th century. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed that prohibited employers from discriminating against gender, creed, race, or ethnic background. There were many voices who opposed the progressive approach regarding immigrants. In 1978, Russian-born immigrant Emmy Schaefer became an advocate for an English-only Miami and gained much support for her campaign. This anti-immigrant sentiment would continue to spread throughout the country for years to follow. 6 years later, Ronald Reagan signed IRCA, Immigration Reform and Control Act, to tighten border security and prevent undocumented immigrants from crossing the border. Nearly a decade later, in 1994, Proposition 187 passed in California. This would ban undocumented immigrants from receiving public education or any kind of subsidized health care. This proposition was declared unconstitutional 2 years later. In 2010, states began to enact their own immigrant policies as there were not any federal immigration policies in place. In April of that year, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer signed the broadest and toughest immigrant law in U.S. history. The legislation SB 1070 cracks down on anyone harboring or hiring undocumented immigrants and gives the local police unprecedented powers. Despite the passing of harsh immigration laws, DACA was signed in 2012 and offered the children of undocumented immigrants 2 years of deferred deportation. As of 2017, there are approximately 1.1 million legal Central American immigrants and 12.1 million illegal Central American immigrants residing in the United States. While causes for immigration vary, there are four main reasons for its occurrence: work, society, education, and safety. It is no surprise to hear that a significant driving force for migration to the United States is the opportunity for work. As shown in statistics from the United States Immigration Report from 2015, over 3.5 million people migrated to the U.S. in search for work. Workers in places like Mexico make an average of 102.8 pesos a day, which equates to $5.30. The wages in the United States, however, average of $58 a day. This extreme difference in pay is a major incentive for many immigrants seeking job opportunities. Another huge motivating factor for many immigrants is the need to achieve a higher quality of life. It is widely believed that America would be a more ideal place to raise a family and provide a better future for their children. In addition, immigrants often have family already living in the United States and therefore migrate to live with them. As well as the societal benefits that America offers, many come here to work towards a better education and to eventually get a better job. With the vast number of universities, community colleges, and trade schools, many find that the United States has more to offer than surrounding countries. Lastly, one of the biggest factors behind immigration to the United States from Central America is safety. Gang violence and extreme violence forces many to flee their home in fear of their lives. Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, often called the Northern Triangle, was named the most violent place in the world in 2016. In 2015, the homicide rate in this area was up to 200 per 100,000 people, compared to America at only 5 per 100,000 people. Oftentimes, many of these people do not have a place to go, and they head north towards America in hope to claim asylum and receive help. In regards to this presentation, one thing must be understood before continuing. This presentation is under no circumstances advocating for an open border, all-inclusive United States. It is instead pushing for immigration policy reform. The current policies are outdated and no longer beneficial to the United States, as you will later see. Laws are put into place to provide a backbone for each society and for the citizens' welfare and safety. Every proper civilization has thrived with a set of legislation. The United States has a solid foundation in its lawmaking process and has many foundational resources to refer to, such as the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and of course, the Declaration of Independence. These documents provide a legal basis for right and wrong. Laws must go through many stages in order to be made official and must meet certain criteria. Those bills that pass through and are declared just and good for the people will be made into a law. Lon L. Fuller's The Morality of Law details that for a law to be made indispensable, it must contain certain principles he referred to as the inner morality of law. These principles state that the law must be general, public, clear, and stable in order to be considered a proper law. These principles must be taken into consideration when approaching the rule of law and when approaching law and order. The rule of law can be defined as the principle that all people and institutions are subject to and accountable to a law that is fairly applied and enforced. The rule of law allows for specific procedures to be initiated in the case of illegal activity. However, the rule of law fails to take into consideration individual circumstances and approaches every situation with the same principles. For example, when a person commits theft, they are arrested, tried, and if found guilty, put in jail. This method is then applied to all those who commit the same crime. Law and order, on the other hand, is directed more towards the concept of order and control. Law and order demands strict punishment for crimes, even if that involves going around certain legal procedures. An example of this would be if a thief was caught, denied a trial to speed up the case, and then placed in jail. In modern day, the concept of law and order often undermines the rule of law. For example, on June 24, 2018, President Donald Trump, a self-proclaimed law and order president, sent out a social media message. This post was in reference to immigrants entering the United States. The message was, "When somebody comes in, we must immediately, with no judges or court cases, bring them back from where they came." It can be seen how in saying there should be a removal of judges and court cases would be in violation of the 14th Amendment. which guarantees all persons under U.S. jurisdiction equal protection under the laws. The 14th Amendment, as said by Yale Law School's Dr. Christina Rodriguez, is applicable to both citizens and non-citizens, as the constitutional laws apply to everyone physically on U.S. soil. Therefore, to proceed with the removal of a person without trial would be considered unconstitutional. This is how law and order often undermines the rule of law. Since 2018, at least 5 major laws or regulations have been broken or declared unjust. A public announcement was made that the Trump administration will begin separating child immigrants from their parents while in border control from April 2018 to June 2018. However, this was found to be false, as separation of the families had begun a year prior to the public announcement. This separation was then declared unconstitutional by a federal court. The attempted termination of DACA was ruled to have violated the Administrative Procedure Act. Because of this, DACA was restarted, and the courts who attempted to terminate it have been stripped of some responsibilities. This is because the federal courts who reinstated DACA believed the government had failed to consider the dependence of many immigrants on this program. These are only a few examples of how laws are being twisted, abused, and broken in order to uphold a standard of order that in fact hurts the lives of many people seeking a better life and crossing the border. Certain laws are being altered and disregarded to appease a preordained result. Instead of working towards a common solution and creating new legislation in place of older one, policies are being shaped to fit an already decided outcome. In order to combat the termination of beneficial and modern laws, the administration must build an immigration system to suit the needs of an ever-changing and growing nation. Immigration laws are still abiding by rules and numerical limits that were placed decades ago. Over 3.7 million individuals are waiting to be approved for a visa into the United States, with some having already waited 10 to 20 years. Many of these undocumented immigrants may never be granted legal entry into the United States in their lifetime. Millions of undocumented workers are employed in the United States with low-skill positions. Without these workers, many American industries would not be able to reach the level of supply and demand that is required of them. However, 3.5 million Central Americans are competing annually for only 5,000 low-skill work visas. If there is such a high labor demand and an abundance of eager workers, why have those laws not been adjusted? In 2016, the Center for American Progress said that if all undocumented workers were removed from the workforce, it would immediately reduce the nation's GDP by 1.4% and ultimately by 2.6% and reduce cumulative GDP over 10 years by $4.7 trillion. The present immigrant limits and restrictions have become too unrealistic for our modern society, and they need to change in order to benefit not only immigrants, but all of America. America used to be on the front lines of providing asylum for refugees fleeing numerous countries. With the retreat of the United States from the main stage of asylum, there has emerged an instability throughout other nations. This has left a lack of encouragement to other nations to step forward and be a safe place for those fleeing persecution. The refugee admission target in 1990 reached over its 100,000 target in each year leading up to 2016. In 2016, during the Obama administration, the refugee target rose to 110,000. However, during the Trump administration, those numbers dwindled to a mere 30,000 refugees by the end of 2018. The United States must establish a new system for humane asylums. It has disconnected itself from being a place of safety for those seeking help. While it should be understood that it would not be America's exclusive responsibility to protect each and every refugee who requests protection, a fair system must be set up. The Northern Triangle and Border Stabilization Act is a bill proposed by Congresswoman Zoe Lafren. This bill would allow qualified American professionals to go into Central America with the goal to revive some of the problems they are facing, such as crime, food shortages, and persecution. In addition, the rates for asylum seekers has risen 2,000% over the past 10 years. The U.S. is currently processing approximately 300,000 migrants each year and letting in only about 10%. The asylum process has been dwindling for years and is now morally questionable. Many Central Americans travel with young children and babies who are then detained for days and weeks and up to months at a time. Revising the asylum process would be time-consuming and expensive, but would be beneficial at the end. Revisions would, however, be nowhere near as expensive as the $40 million spent by the Trump administration to send 5,000 soldiers to the southern wall. The focus needs to change from being on immigration enforcement and to being on immigration and asylum reform. There is a slight stigma associated with discussions about America's current immigration system, as it labels those who defend the current system as radical, heartless people who do not care about the lives of those who attempt to cross. On the other hand, those who think it would be a good idea to do away with many regulations held within the system are considered un-American and against the principles which have been established throughout this country's history. However, there's one thing clear about this stigma. Neither side knows exactly how the immigration system should be altered so that it is effective and safe. Many people do not know whether the current structure should even be defended. There's a widespread debate in the media to build a Mexico-US wall or deport all undocumented immigrants, yet less than 35% of Americans support either of those proposed solutions. Why then are these solutions consistently the most well-recognized and defended in today's immigration debate? The astounding disapproval for some of the most well-defended immigration solutions shows that the current system and the direction it is moving towards is one that may not be worthy to defend, especially if those solutions do not take into consideration the situation of each individual that it would affect. Currently in our immigration system, there is a one-size-fits-all approach when considering what should happen to those caught illegally crossing into the United States or to those who are found to be undocumented residing in the United States. This approach primarily involves deportation back to the country in which the individual originated. This method affects every undocumented immigrant, from the narcotic smuggler who's crossed to sell their product to the single mother fleeing with her children from gang violence. To help settle the wide variety of reasons for illegally residing in the United States, individual immigration courts need to be established. These courts would deal with similar offenses before making a decision on whether that individual should be deported or not. For example, there would be separate courts for those seeking asylum, those crossing for financial reasons, or those crossing for family. Only after a court hearing would an individual be allowed to stay. However, there should be put in place more options of punishment aside from deportation. As said by Professor Juliet Stumpf regarding this topic, proportionate system of sanctions for immigration violations should consider the following. 1. The gravity of the violation. 2. The benefit to the United States for allowing the migrant to come in, and finally 3, the risk that the non-citizen has in remaining in this country. Therefore, this would suggest multiple levels of offense and punishment for those who are undocumented, such as probation, monetary fines, or delay the individual's ability to file a visa for a family member. This would allow for better relations and better solutions to the immigration problem. Today, there are about 12.5 million undocumented immigrants residing in the country, who have been here on an average of almost 15 years. They are parents of 6.7 million U.S. citizens and pay $125.5 billion a year in federal, state, and local taxes. The illegal immigration system has, for many years, offered inappropriate opportunities to those who come or want to stay in the United States. This inadequate system has led to those residing in the United States without proper documentation to have nowhere to turn in regards to achieve legal status. These migrants, if they go to a government facility to speak with someone about legal residency, will most likely be detained and deported back to their native country. Even those who have lived in the United States for decades, started a family, received education, and have become contributing members of society are susceptible to immediate deportation if discovered. Families are torn apart in the blink of an eye when an undocumented immigrant is found. Despite the contributions of many of these immigrants have on the economy, society, and the workforce, they are given inadequate solutions to seek out legal status. The replacement of this extra-legal immigration system with a path to citizenship is necessary to restore respect for the rule of law. Many undocumented immigrants living in the United States are not lazy people who have come to leech off healthcare, steal jobs, or commit crimes. They came to work and make a life for themselves. 8 million out of the 12 million legal migrants are in the labor force. These people boost the economy and allow corporations to thrive. They benefit America but reap few rewards. A path to legal status should be made for those people who already reside in the United States. According to CNN, almost 3/4 of Americans agree with that statement. In 2013, the Senate passed a bill that would have created a path to citizenship, one that is tough yet fair. By fulfilling reasonable requirements such as paying fines, learning English, and waiting their turn to be considered, these immigrants could become law-abiding citizens. Unfortunately, the House of Representatives never even voted on this comprehensive immigration reform bill. Steps should be taken, such as proposing said bills, to help change the unforgiving reality of living in America as an undocumented immigrant. There are three primary reasons people are opposed to immigration or immigration reform. Amnesty, or a failure to enforce our immigration laws, will destroy the rule of law in the United States. Asylum seekers do not fit the proper criteria to be granted asylum, and that immigrants will take American jobs and be overall detrimental to the society. In the United States, the laws put in place must follow the rule of law. Each law must be applied equally to the citizens of that country, and the punishment must be applied fairly to anyone who breaks that law. Laws must also have predictable outcomes and should be able to withstand time and continue to be upheld in every generation. If we abandon current laws, more specifically immigration laws, we would violate the standing of the rule of law. In addition, if we alter the immigration system's laws, when will the law changing end? Why couldn't we go about revising other legislation? Laws are put in place for a reason. Lawmakers have deemed crossing into the border or living in the United States with lack of documentation as illegal, and therefore the current immigration system must be followed. It is only the weak laws that get revised, therefore we must hold immigration policy to be strong. In addition, altering current immigration policies will require an entire rewrite of those policies, which could take years to perfect and enact. Therefore, immigration policies must remain the same in order to uphold the rule of law. Those who defend the keeping of the current immigration system claim that laws require a predictable outcome, and that changing legislation would make immigration policies less predictable. However, the outcome of current regulations are far from predictable. Changing current legislation regarding immigration would help to fix laws that are unstable and unpopular. In addition, laws have been changed many times in this country's history, and more often than not, it was for the better. For example, segregation was reinforced through the Jim Crow laws that were upheld by many local governments in the early to mid 20th century. They kept blacks and whites separated by fear of vigilantes. However, in 1964, these laws were eliminated through the institution of the Civil Rights Act. The Jim Crow laws were institutionalized and legal. However, this does not make them just laws. In the same way, immigration laws are not unchangeable and are not always justified. Reform of these laws would not make the rule of law weaker, but stronger. It would show that the American administration is able to adapt and change its legislation. Many people who are opposed to immigration and immigration policy reform believe that a large proportion of asylum seekers do not fit the proper criteria to be granted asylum. Many of those crossing the border claiming asylum are in fact coming into the country for work or economic reasons. This, of course, does not fit within the statutory requirement for asylum. In addition, many people who intend to cross into the United States and have to cross through another country first do not claim asylum in that country. If someone is fleeing from Guatemala and must travel through Mexico, there is no reason they cannot remain in Mexico and claim asylum there. If they do not claim asylum there is no reason for them to continue into America only to eventually claim asylum at the border. The caravans that have made major news headlines over the years are notorious for coming to the US-Mexico border with no good reason for claiming asylum. United States Border Control must take in these individuals and find out whether or not they qualify for asylum, which many of them do not. However, Mexico is doing nothing to prohibit the migration of these caravans. In fact, many groups and organizations assist the people into reaching the border by providing food and clothes. Many of the immigrants who travel to the border to assert false asylum claims should therefore be turned away to keep those individuals from abusing the asylum laws. There are many reasons, both allowed and disallowed by asylum laws, people use to claim asylum into the United States. However, the accepted reasons are only claimable by an incredibly small percentage of people. In addition, the already limited reasons to claim asylum, the Trump administration recently removed fear of gang violence and domestic violence from that list. There is currently a backlog of 300,000 asylum seekers since January 2019. These people will wait an average of 5 years for their claim to be processed, and only 10% will be accepted. Yet, for some facing immediate danger, 5 years is too long. The reality is, because of the broken asylum system, some people who would pass asylum legislation will die during the wait. Lindsay Harris, the vice chair of the National Asylum Committee of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, has said, "The rates of denial for credible fear and abuse have skyrocketed." This means, in addition to the incredibly long approval wait, those who have appropriate claims for asylum are being rejected. In addition, the Trump administration's recent Migrant Protection Protocols, or Remain in Mexico program, makes those who cross to the United States southern border via Mexico remain in Mexico to claim asylum there. However, for asylum seekers, Mexico is not safe. Over 30% of women seeking asylum were sexually abused on their journey through Mexico. So why would they want to claim asylum there? As well as sexual violence, many Mexican citizens target refugees for theft and homicide. Therefore, asylum criteria should be revisited and expanded to those in dire situations. Lastly, one of the biggest arguments that arises surrounding immigration is that immigrants will take American jobs, lower wages, and especially hurt the poor. Many low-income and poverty-stricken American cities have many willing citizens who would be eager for the opportunity to receive a decent-paying job. However, many employers deny those Americans the chance and instead bring in undocumented immigrants to work those jobs. These immigrants negatively affect the economy and the workforce. By taking these jobs, they maintain the power to keep poverty-stricken towns in poverty and unemployed people unemployed. The Pew Research Center estimates that there are 7.5 million illegal immigrants in the U.S. workforce. That means over 7 million Americans are being denied jobs by undocumented persons. In addition, these illegal immigrants are being provided with Medicare, insurance, and other services that someone who is undocumented should not be receiving. There are millions of immigrants working in the United States, with about half being undocumented. These immigrants do not come in and steal American jobs, however. In fact, they often take the jobs other Americans do not want. Hard factory labor for $5 a day is often a position passed up by Americans. Yet an immigrant from Guatemala who is accustomed to being paid $2.50 a day, this job sounds wonderful. Unemployment in the United States has decreased from 9% in 2011 to 3.6% in 2019, implying that the positions filled by immigrants do not seem to affect the American public from lowering their unemployment rate. Immigration is often tied to economic growth as well. In areas of low domestic migration, immigration in the workforce helps raise the economic status of that area. In regards to welfare, most immigrants do not have access to it. The only medical insurance illegal immigrants use often enough to mention is emergency services. Even with the availability of these emergency services, many undocumented immigrants will avoid contacting them in the event of an emergency out of fear of being taken into custody and deported. These immigrants also have access to emergency Medicaid. However, they are 42% less likely to use it compared to a native. In addition, shifting immigration policies under the Trump administration are leading to substantially increased fears among the immigrant community. Many who are not illegal immigrants are still in fear of the stigma that has been placed over their community and are unsure about the creation of new limiting Medicaid or welfare policies. The United States is a nation built on the courage and dedication of immigrants. It has thrived and developed into a country known for its power, perseverance, and freedom. The laws made over the years have been crucial to the growth of this nation. However, some of these laws no longer prove to be beneficial. The immigration policies in place concerning Central American immigration no longer reflect the reality of modern day. It is ill-adapted in suiting the criteria of the rule of law or needs of asylum seekers. It must create courts that will process those wishing to immigrate more efficiently and create a path of citizenship for those who are undocumented. To be an American is an honor. It associates itself with hard work, diligence, and pride. This honor, however, should not limit itself to those lucky enough to be born with it, but a prize to be won for those who seek it. Changing immigration policies will allow those who have worked, waited, and fought to say that they too are proud to be an American. Thank you.